Welcome one, welcome all back into Lions Central Radio. I am Nick Castora. By now, I believe you all know my co-host, Brandon Alysiglu. Thank you so much for tuning once more into the podcast. Uh, oh, uh, shoot. I'm getting a lot of playback back there, Brandon.
From what?
Hold on. Let me just talk for a minute. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, that was weird. It was just for a second. There was a big echo for me, and now there isn't. So no worries. I'll just start it over. That's weird.
Okay.
Welcome one, welcome all into Lions Central Radio. I am Nick Castora. By now, I hope you all know my co-host, Brandon Alysiglu, always alongside for this wonderful ride. We're in the doldrums of summer, folks. You all know that, but we do have some really fun stuff to get into on the podcast today. ESPN did their QB rankings and what have you. We'll get into that. We'll do some fun Q&A stuff on some assorted Lions topics, some of which you guys threw in from mailbag, and some stuff you guys tossed us on Facebook, so we always appreciate that. First, as always, I toss it to my co-host, Brandon.
Yeah, folks, we want to take this moment to go ahead and thank you once again for tuning in as you have each and every week. Despite the audio problems we have had, we are getting real creative now. In some ways, going back to almost an 8-bit technology to try to bring you a better podcast. So hopefully our problems are behind us, and you folks can keep supporting us through lionscentralradio.com. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and click through the Amazon banner. Won't cost you a penny, and it'll help us continue to improve the show.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate it, folks. And as I mentioned at the top, at least the biggest actual news, and if you want to call it that, is ESPN coming out with their annual QB rankings based on talk they do with scouts, coaches, and people within front offices around the league, anonymously, of course. And last year, Matthew Stafford finished 12th in these rankings, or finished 13th. This year, he finishes 12th, which is in the second tier of quarterbacks as they have it. They do 5 tiers, but no one finished in the bottom 5th tier this year. So 4 tiers. He's in the second tier of quarterbacks, just ahead of guys like Cam Newton, Alex Smith, and Ryan Tannehill, and tied with an Eli Manning. Brandon, are you surprised, or do you think this is about where Stafford belongs in these kind of rankings?
I'm somewhat surprised that he didn't fall further behind just from a year of kind of reining him in. And granted, yes, as everybody's talked about, the interception rate was way down. It's the lowest of his career, but 22 touchdowns wasn't exciting. There were a lot of missed throws, a lot of missed reads that it's not entirely clear that he can ever really become an accurate quarterback. So for them to continue to believe that he is that gifted, I guess that he could still make that jump. I guess it's somewhat of an endorsement. I didn't see him staying that high, especially above Cam Newton.
Yeah, that was the one that surprised me too, was him staying ahead of Cam Newton. The quotes from coaches, from one coach, which it's something it's tough to argue with. Here's the actual direct quote. No doubt he's a 2 and I love him, but something is missing. Offensive coach said Stafford could be like Aaron Rodgers if he had the burning passion and if he had Mike McCarthy from day one, because he's talented like that and quick with the ball. But you look at the look on Stafford's face before the game, and then you look at Rodgers' face, or Big Ben's face, or Luck's, or Drew Brees' or Phillip Rivers, and you look at Stafford's eyes, and it's like gym class. It's like, I hope we win. I think we're pretty good, as opposed to, I'm going to rip your throat out. And I think that's the end of the quote, but I think that's a sentiment that a lot of people have expressed about Stafford is, does he have that killer instinct, and is he someone that is just dying to win football games? And I don't know how much stock you put in that, Brandon, but it's definitely a sentiment that's shared around the league.
Well, and it's weird because it's, in some ways it can be considered he doesn't care enough, or he's not doing the prep work, which, there's nothing to suggest that's not happening, because that's usually where you're getting that from. It's that Michael Jordan mentality versus LeBron James. But it's also, I mean, the story of Joe Montana, and before he led a 94-yard scoring drive to win the Super Bowl, pointing out John Candy. I mean, there's also a certain coolness which has obviously aided him late in games. That's why he's been so great with all these comebacks. I can see what they're saying, but I think that might be a bit overrated. Honestly, I think a lot of it is he doesn't have that consistency. He doesn't have that comfort level with his technique to be a top tier guy. But it is at least encouraging to know, or at least to see other people see the same things. They can win with him at quarterback, and he doesn't have to be the absolute reason why. He just can't hurt them as much, and he needs to add a little more.
Yeah, one other quote that a director said, and this is one I really disagree with actually, is that the quote was Stafford has a little of what Cutler's got. He has mechanical things. He'll throw it up for grabs. He's a 2 in the ratings. I don't know if he has internally what Flacco and Ryan have in terms of the will to be special. I see those guys working on their mechanics, which is huge for guys like Peyton and Brady. Stafford's mechanics have not changed, and that's the end of the quote. Uh, I think his mechanics, and while I've disagreed with some of the throws that he's made, it's something that the coaches have encouraged him to use those different angles. And I don't see him as a Jay Cutler whatsoever, as someone that his teammates don't even seem to want to play with or for. Whereas I think Stafford has his teammates on his side, and they like having him in the huddle with them. I think Cutler's a really terrible comparison to make to a Matthew Stafford.
No, I completely agree with the Jay Cutler isn't the right one to make. You all right over there?
Yep. Sorry about that.
I thought you might have fallen into a lagoon.
No, I had the straw in my drink. We haven't had any Ziggies yet, but I got going.
Gotcha. Well, right on, brother. I would probably need it. It is that late in the off season. There's not a whole lot going on. But as far as Stafford's mechanics and all that kind of stuff, it is true that he's never had that consistency. But as far as the Jay Cutler comparison, the only way that it makes sense is that he has all this potential and never quite harnessed it for those 3 or 4 killer seasons. And that's where I think it's okay to say that. Granted, he's not emotionally or hopefully from a maturity standpoint the same as Jay Cutler. But as far as possible career arc, it could be very similar.
Yeah. There's a lot of the names ahead of Stafford in this poll. It's tough to argue with. I guess Eli Manning at this point in his career, who's number 12, tied with Stafford, is someone that you can debate back and forth. But the other names ahead of him, I can't make a case for Stafford ahead of any of them. Matt Ryan was 11. Flacco was 10. Tony Romo at 9. You had Russell Wilson at 8. Philip Rivers 7, and then the elite guys up above the names, Breeze, Luck, Rodgers, Manning, and Brady. So Stafford at 12 seems to fit where he belongs. I can't argue with too much here. Where you can argue for Stafford is kind of in the next section we're going to get into, which is something we did, a type of thing we did a couple episodes ago, which was a little bit of a Q&A session where we just kind of rapid fire random questions looking forward to this season and what we expect. So, for example, the first one we have here, Brandon, I'll toss it to you, which is rank the NFC North quarterbacks by who will have the most passing yards in 2015. So 1 through 4, you got Bridgewater, Stafford, Rodgers, and Cutler. What do you got?
I think obviously number 1 is going to be Rodgers. You can't really discount him. He is. Yeah, I mean, and it is possible that they could give the ball more to Eddie Lacy, and somebody could catch him. Matthew Stafford is what 100 and. Let's see here, 24 yards behind him.
Right.
So, that's a quarter for Rodgers. But if they run the ball more, you could see it happening. I think next, I would probably have to go with Jay Cutler, actually. I think that they're going to try to chuck the ball a lot more. They don't have it. Detroit supposedly going back to this power running game stature or scheme. And they're going to try to feed all of their guys and take a little bit off Stafford's shoulders. So he might not be airing it out as much. I expect Cutler's still going to have to because the defense didn't make that many improvements in Chicago. And Matt Forte is about 37 now or whatever it might be. And I'm only – this isn't an indictment against Teddy Bridgewater, but he goes last because I don't know if you just saw – I think it was today the Vikings
restructured, yeah,
Adrian Peterson's deal to give him, I think, $20 million guaranteed. So they're going to feed him the ball, and they don't really care how much longer he runs for, just that he runs it off this year.
Yeah, I think the battle here, if there is one, is between 2 and 3 with Cutler and Stafford, and it's how much of a running game do the Bears have? Do they still lean on Matt Forte? Do they get Jeremy Langford involved, the running back from Michigan State? Does he become an actual part of this offense, or is it more of the swing passes and stuff to Forte out in the flats? The Lions say they're committed to the run, and Stafford's going to keep going down in passing. So I'm with you. I think it is Rodgers, Cutler, Stafford, Bridgewater. I think 2 and 3 is where you can see an issue, but Bridgewater, I think, is a distant 4 just because AP's there, and Rodgers is obviously at 1. Lion-centric question here. This one was from the mailbag. Which combo is going to score more touchdowns? Calvin Johnson and Amir Abdullah, or Joique Bell and Golden Tate?
As much as people might think it's going to be Bell because we talked about that power scheme, I still have to go with Calvin Johnson. Just maybe even combined with both of those guys, Bell and Tate. Tate's not going to be a red zone threat.
Right.
I mean, he's quick and he can do some things down there, but more than likely you're going to go to your bigger bodies. Calvin is the best and the biggest body as far as the outside guys, and I think Joseph Foria might steal one or two, but it won't be many. And then Abdullah, as long as he can get, if he can get out in the open field, he's going to get a few. He's going to score a few on swing passes. I think he can equally Tate himself. So I think on that one, we both know it's Calvin Abdullah. So we're going to go ahead and jump to the next question here, Nick. If this season is a failure, which person is carrying more risk, Jim Caldwell or Matthew Stafford? Who has more on the line?
Well, I think for better or worse, this team has Matthew Stafford for the foreseeable future. The eggs are all in the basket on that front. Now, they do have Caldwell locked up for a couple of years, but a coach is always going to have more of a hot seat than a franchise quarterback, and someone who you're paying as one of the top guys in the league. Whether or not he is a different issue, but they're paying him that way. So the Lions and Matthew Stafford are linked at the hip for at least the next 3 to 4 years. If the risk is who could potentially leave Detroit sooner, it's Jim Caldwell, and I don't think it's particularly close.
I do agree at least that Jim Caldwell would probably be given the door quicker, but
Yeah.
I won't say that Stafford is definitely going to be the quarterback for the next 3 to 4 years, just because the cap hit drops from $27.2 million this year to $11 million next year. And if it's that bad of a season, and the opportunity comes up to draft a quarterback they'd like, they would have to think about that move if Stafford doesn't show improvement. He's now had 2 years with the QB-centric staff. He's going to be, what is he, 28 right now?
Yeah.
And so, do you really see him getting a lot better? At what point are you locked into a Jay Cutler-like situation as far as from a big contract for a guy who can't take that next jump? So it's going back to those quarterback rankings. A lot of that still had to do with his potential and his gifts. It didn't necessarily have to do with what he was doing. So I don't know how much longer he really has.
Yeah, for clarification, I looked it up. Stafford is 27. He'll be 28 in February, so just after this season, or hopefully during the season. I don't know
it really
how much
is July.
Yeah. I don't know how much we asked this. We've been doing this show for 2 years now. We've asked this each summer: is will Matthew Stafford grow? Will he develop? At 27, how much growth or development is there? It's just how does he fit within the scheme of the offense, and can they work around his skill set? Because he's not going to make massive improvements, or at least not as much as a lot of people hope he will. So I agree with a lot of what you're saying there, that there is risk for Stafford, but I think the more immediate risk goes to Jim Caldwell. Next question from the mailbag: is too much being made out of the third wide receiver spot, and who's going to be behind Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate?
Somewhat. I mean, it's always a concern when you have a position that doesn't really have anybody that's defined for said position, and it's not a competition of, oh, both these guys were really good last year.
Right.
I'd say, oh, are any of them any good? So that's not really something you like. But as far as the actual position itself, when you look up the New Orleans Saints for 2012, the actual third wide receiver, because we're going to assume that the running backs are getting plenty of passes. Eric Ebron, maybe Foria, probably not Pettigrew, but hey, you never know. When you go back and look at the 2012 New Orleans Saints, Devery Henderson was actually the third wide receiver, but he had the sixth most catches on the team with 22. Yep. That's not much more than Ross had last year. Or actually it's less. And so and he had the one touchdown, which was equal to Ross. So I don't know that it's as important as we like to talk about it as much as the third option is.
Yeah. Well, and here's how I view it is, I don't think the third wide receiver on the depth chart matters so much, and assuming everyone's healthy. If Calvin and Golden Tate are both healthy throughout the season, this is a spot that they're not counting on for much anyway, because as you said, it's the Abdullahs, the Ebrons, the Forias to a lesser extent that they're expecting to be really that third option on any given play. The only way that this becomes something that we do need to make a big deal out of is if Calvin's injuries, which have become more pronounced as years have gone on, he's 29 at this point, if he's hurt for a couple games, or if Tate has to miss time, then you have someone who's the number 2 wide receiver and is on the field every play. So, and that goes for every team though. So outside of injuries, I don't think the third wide receiver spot is really that big of a deal.
No, I don't see it as being that big a deal. It's just something that you'd like to have. It's a big injury concern. It's the main thing, right?
Yeah.
That's what everybody's worried about. I did want to take this time though to point out real quick because I thought maybe it was so. There's a certain quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
The year he went in, he was 27, had a pretty solid year. He won the NFL MVP and the Super Bowl, and his numbers jumped pretty considerably. Passing yards, a little over 700. His completion percentage up 3 points. His touchdowns from 28 to 45, interceptions down from 11 to 6. Basically, is Matthew Stafford the next Aaron Rodgers?
I was going to say, was this Rodgers? Yeah, it had to be. Sure, yeah. What was that Rodgers' actual? Was that his third season or second or third season as the actual starter for them?
It was 1, 2, 3, fourth.
Wow, it's his fourth year. Hey, you know what? Matthew Stafford can be Aaron Rodgers. Sure, I didn't realize it was that far along in his development cycle. Why not? Why not Stafford taking that massive leap forward at this point? It's July, folks. I agree.
But it's kind of nuts. It's just how far that he did jump. But the problem is his baseline was a little higher to start with. I mean, granted, 22 isn't too far from 28. And the 11 interceptions, not much off the mark either. But none of us are making that comparison. I just thought it was interesting because we were talking about being 27 and where that development ends. Because the same conversation comes in with the third wide receiver, Ryan Broyles. At what point are you going to get diminishing returns as far as getting your athleticism back? He's almost too old. Well, sticking with the old theme, Jim Caldwell, pretty old. But that doesn't mean he hasn't done well as the coach of the Lions. I think we can both agree with that one. For once, we can agree. But when you look around at the NFC North, where would you rank the Lions coaching staff overall? Which one would you rather have? Is there another team you'd rather have? And are there multiple teams you'd rather have?
Well, I will say this. I read a phenomenal article on the topic on Bleacher Report by one of their writers, Brandon Olisoglu. Broke this topic down front to back.
I just published that.
Hey, and I'm one of the 478 reads that you have on it, my friend. I was all over it. So, yeah, if you're looking at the coaching staff as a whole, obviously, if you look at the individual parts, some are better than others. You love Terrell Austin as a defensive coordinator, whereas Joe Lombardi as the OC makes you scratch your head more often than not. And I guess Caldwell's kind of the happy medium at this point between the two. If you're taking a staff as a whole, it's hard not to take the Packers staff, a staff that has quite a few guys that have actually won a Super Bowl and been pretty close to another one, as you mentioned in your piece. I can't disagree with basically anything you said here. I like Mike Zimmer a lot, and it says quite a bit that he would be fourth in the NFC North, but I can't argue it behind McCarthy, Fox, and I guess Caldwell at 3. That's a really good division head coaching wise. Mike Zimmer, I think, is in another division would be much higher, but in the NFC North, he's at 4. So, Brandon, I can't argue with the rankings that you put on paper, and you gave plenty more reasons than I can here. So I'll let you take the floor with this one.
Yeah, I ended up coming in, at least with the overall head coach. I ended up putting Caldwell third behind Fox, and I've seen. So I looked at the poll. I don't know if you looked at that. 71% of or 328 respondents said Detroit's. You have to expect these things to some degree. But 22.9% Green Bay's, they're by far the second highest option on here. And that's what I'd have to agree with. I think Mike McCarthy has done pretty much everything right, it seems, in a lot of ways. That team has just continued to come, has always been that close. I mean, last year was an onside kick and a little bit of craziness at the end of the NFC Championship game, or maybe they have their second title in 4 years or 5 years, whatever it is. And I mean, remember the Brett Favre situation? Right. He just refused to screw around. He's like, no, this is what it's going to be. And his team went on and did just fine. And obviously things went fine for Favre as well for a year or two until he learned about camera phones. But this is a family program, and we will steer away from that. I too like Mike Zimmer. It's a little too much. He's just a little too unproven. One thing I do want to ask you, and I specifically put it in this piece, but I didn't specifically ask you, would you take Terrell Austin over Vic Fangio?
I would.
The Bears.
Yeah, I like the variations in his schemes, and in your piece you put the as you well know, that Vic Fangio, you had him 1 and Austin 2, and then Dom Capers is a distant third, I would imagine. But
Yeah.
Fangio's defenses in San Francisco were really good. I just think what the Lions had personnel wise was a lot lesser than what Fangio was working with in San Francisco when he was having some of the best defenses in the league. Again, it's a small sample size for Austin and Detroit, but just off of that 1 year, what he did with lesser talent, what I think in the linebacking core in the secondary, obviously he had one of the best D lines in the league. But I'm excited by what Austin does as far as mixing up blitz packages and what he does in coverage as well. So yeah, I would go Austin 1.
Yeah, and it's you can really argue it either way. I mean, the
Yeah.
thing that really came down to was Fangio's defenses for 4 years as coordinator there in San Francisco, second best scoring unit, and that's with them being the 10th. You know, they were the 10th best scoring unit last year, and it seemed like the team was a dumpster fire. So to be able to hold all that together, yeah, you got to give him some credit there for longevity. He's got a much bigger challenge though now ahead of him.
Yeah.
I guess if I was going to hire one, I'm probably going Terrell Austin because we have seen that creativity that I think can maybe go well at the next level, and that's why I think it was NFL.com rated him the highest rated head coach or head coaching candidate among assistant coaches.
Yeah.
But and that's just all that is a display of faith, Nick. It's just a display of faith. And I guess I want to know about your faith in the offensive line right now compared to where you had it about midway last season. I know going into last season, you still had that confidence and that hope that they would still be a good unit. I was in love with
this offensive line. Oh, does anyone remember 2013? Does anyone remember how nice 2013 was from with the offensive line perspective? Yeah, going into last year looked just wonderful, and midway through it all fell apart. And I don't know how I feel about this offensive line, honestly, Brandon. I mean, what do we expect, or what can we expect out of Laken Tomlinson and Manny Ramirez? Is he going to be getting snaps? Is Travis Swanson a viable starter? There's so many more questions than answers. I guess as far as more faith than midway, I kind of have to, because at least there's optimism around these young names that they have. And midway through last year, it just looked like a dumpster fire. So it doesn't feel like a fair question because I don't have a ton of faith in the offensive line at this point, but there is potential and there's promise. I don't know how much of it we're going to see immediately with the O-line. It's not a position group that I'm very confident in on this team, but from just to answer the question, I do have more faith in it now than midway through last year.
Yeah, and I unfortunately I'm going to have to agree with you. I think I probably I might be in the same boat as I was at this time last year.
It's close.
I didn't feel great about it going into last year. I'm more hopeful though this year. Last year was just why has Dominic Mariola never done that before? You know, and you start to see those things, and it's tough to keep that. To keep that going, obviously, if you only did it once in 14 years. So I don't know. I'm probably somewhere in between. I can't wait to finally see them with pads on and hear how that's going. And I think we'll learn a lot more then, obviously. But before we get to finding out how this team actually looks on the field, right now, do you feel more confident about this team than you did a year ago?
Absolutely. And you know what? And that's not just fluff in the offseason or what have you. If not now, then, I mean, when are you going to be more confident in this team? And I realize their best defensive player is gone in Ndamukong Suh, but Calvin Johnson isn't someone who's going to get better. He's at the peak or maybe slightly on the downslide of his skills. Terrell Austin's probably not going to be here beyond this year. The offense now is in its second year of understanding this scheme and what they have. And I'm more confident in both the offensive game plan and the players within it. I love the bringing in Amir Abdullah in the backfield. I think he's going to add a lot of versatility to the offense. Obviously, the defensive line is where they would probably take a step back. I guess we'll have to see on the field how Haloti Ngata does. But overall, I am more confident in this team. I really am. And this is a team that went to the playoffs a year ago, obviously. So going into this season, compared to where I was going into last year, I like the Detroit Lions more now than I did then, even though I think the division around them has also improved.
Yeah, this is really getting boring, Nick. I'm really
I make a lot of good points.
Agreeing with you. I know, and it's probably because of that reading you did right before you jumped on the air. You can't set me up like that. I'm going to have to do it. But getting back to the point, we've now seen this team do it. We've seen these defensive players. It was a lot of conjecture at this time regarding Darius Slay or is DeAndre Levy really that good? Can Glover Quinn take the step? And all these, and Ezekiel Ansah, Ziggy. We saw a ton from him last season. I think he can make another jump just based off the fact that what he's doing in practice. They're talking about him getting more physical and using his traits and learning the inside moves. So all of these things are good indicators that this team could carry on their success. We saw Stafford kind of rein it in and do all that. But the offensive line, again, is going to be the huge question mark. And because I didn't have a lot of faith in it last year at this time, and I'm more confident in the rest, I guess that means I am more confident in the team as a whole. There is one more thing I can't let you leave since you weren't here last week. You got stuck in a Chicago airport or whatever cockamamie story you came up with.
O'Hare is a wonderful facility. Big fan of the Chicago O'Hare Airport, but continue.
But anyways, we had Ken Platt sitting in your place, and actually he had an article he wrote not too long ago that talked about the average stats for most second-year tight ends and kind of the way they usually progress. And this is using statistics. So 60 receptions, 606 yards, 2 touchdowns. If you were to look at Eric Ebron's line this year, would that be enough?
If I looked at that stat line, would I be happy with it?
Yes.
No, because I think he's going to be a more prominent part of the offense. 606 yards, I think I guess that would be around it. I'm looking more like closer to 680, 700, which is nitpicking, I suppose. But 2 touchdowns is too low. I think he's going to be
just a touch. Yeah, that's definitely a little bit of nitpicking there. Yep, just a little bit.
I'm about to try and compliment the man. Just let me finish the point. I think 2 touchdowns is far too low for what they're going to try and do with Eric Ebron this year. I think he's going to be a prominent red zone target for a team that should be around that area quite a bit. He is the glorified third receiver for this team. At least that's how it looks like it's going to be once the offense finally takes the field. The 60 receptions, I don't know. I know I want to go way higher on the 2 touchdowns if it were an over-under, but the 60 receptions, 606, I want to go higher on all 3, honestly, Brandon. And again, I haven't been the biggest Eric Ebron fan or what have you. I want him to succeed. I just haven't seen it. But just based on how much I think they're going to try and prominently figure him into the offense this year, I think all 3 of those numbers are low.
Yeah, well, and I guess the only one I really took any umbrage with, as far as if that was his year, would be the touchdowns. I'd want to see those. At least you're hoping for 6 or so. Yeah. I mean, and when you look at the 2012 Saints, and granted, it's not impossible that Stafford could throw for 43 touchdowns, but that is a large number. Even if we knocked off 10 of those, the numbers would come down a little bit across the board. But David Thomas had 4 touchdowns that year. Lance Moore had 6. So there's definitely got to be some points out there for him to get. As far as the other ones, it wouldn't be terrible, I don't think. 60 receptions, I think I'd be fine with that, presuming that the running game was doing its job. 600 yards is a little low. But I guess we're going to get you out of here by putting you on the hot seat. You have to pick an over-under for those numbers. You can either pick over, meaning at least 2 of the numbers is over, or under, at least 2 of the numbers is under, what you think his performance will actually be this year.
Yeah, Brandon, as everyone knows, I am Team Ebron, and I do think it's the over on all 3, but I have to pick 2. So I think it's the over on touchdowns for sure. He's going to be over 2 touchdowns this year, and I'll go over on the yardage as well. So if I'm picking 2, it's over on yards and touchdowns. The receptions might be right in that vicinity, but I think it's over on yards and TDs for sure. And if it's not, then all my worst fears are realized, because he's going to get every opportunity to get those kind of numbers.
Well, folks, and when he does get those numbers and probably improves upon them, you can be sure to let Nick know that he was Team Ebron from the start. You can find him on Facebook. You can find the show at Lions Central Radio. You can find the show on Twitter at Lions Central PFC. You can find me on Twitter at Brandon Liskelu. That's ALISOGLU. And you can find Nick Kostora and all of his Ebron love at Nick Kostora, Kostora.
Yeah, looking forward to next week's show, folks. We're gonna have open up the mailbag again on Facebook. I saw a couple questions in there we didn't get a chance to get to on this podcast, but we will next week. So send those in. We look forward to them. We'll find some other topics in the doldrums of the off season to get to as well. Until then, for Brandon Alyssa Lou, I am Nick Costora. Thank you so much for tuning in to Lions Central Radio.